This is going to be the beginning of a two-part message, something I've never addressed before, something I've never heard addressed from a pulpit. And I have heard thousands and thousands of sermons. Starting this morning, we're addressing some economical and philosophical systems from a biblical perspective. And we're going to address capitalism. Capitalism, socialism, and communism. Those words are hot-button words on secular college campuses. 2016 presidential candidate Bernie Sanders is a committed democratic socialist, and millennials voted for him in mass numbers. I might add, democratic socialism is still socialism. Some neo-evangelicals are convinced Jesus was a socialist and that the first church of Jerusalem practiced socialism and probably primitive communism. Pope Francis is extremely socialistic and has serious objections to capitalism. In 2013, he released an 84-page document where he encouraged nations' politicians to, quote, guarantee all citizens dignified work, education, and health care. That is pre-communistic socialism. So this is a relevant subject, and this is all part of understanding a biblical worldview. This morning, we're primarily addressing capitalism and saving socialism and communism until next time. Next time is going to be crazy. A Scottish economist, philosopher, and author named Adam Smith is considered the formal father of capitalism. Smith didn't create capitalism, but he helped formalize it. He authored two major publications on that subject: The Theory of Moral Sentiments in 1759, and An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations in 1776. It is said that Smith laid the foundations for classical free market economic theory. Now, no economic system is perfect, and capitalism can be and often is exploited and misused. So please don't misunderstand this. I am not arguing that capitalism is Christian. Scripture doesn't prescribe a particular transcendent economic model. No economic system is intrinsically biblical. But I am proposing that capitalism is more consistent with biblical principles and therefore more Christian in nature than is socialism and communism. Capitalism is more compatible with Christianity than is socialism and communism, as we hope to demonstrate next time. Notice the definition. Capitalism is an economic system where material goods and wealth and the means for creating material goods and wealth are owned and controlled by private individuals and or corporations. Under capitalism, the production, distribution, and pricing of goods and services is determined from competition in the free market. Capitalists use the words free enterprise. Free enterprise means a person is free to create and operate a business for profit with minimal government interference. Capitalism encourages smaller government. In fact, capitalism cannot survive apart from some limited government. Capitalism encourages entrepreneurism. No other economic system does that to the degree capitalism does. Under capitalism, people are free to purchase and own businesses, real estate, houses, appliances, cars, and literally 1,000,001 other things. Under capitalism, someone is free to be whatever he wants to be. He is free to move wherever he wants to move. And theoretically, he can do all these things with no government interference. Under capitalism, people have the maximum number of choices available to them. Capitalism is spelled freedom, because the most free and open societies are capitalistic societies, not socialistic and communistic societies. Some believe capitalism is alluded to in the Declaration of Independence. The first sentence of that famous document is 71 words long, and no one remembers it. But the second sentence is one of the most well-known sentences in the English language. It contains the most potent and consequential words in our nation's history. The second sentence of the Declaration of Independence reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator, and that Creator is not some evolutionary goo, that Creator is God. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Although it wasn't called capitalism at the beginning, the founders of our nation felt that incorporating capitalism's free market principles was the most effective means of pursuing that happiness. But the unfortunate part is, our nation is moving closer and closer toward European socialism. Capitalism is a nasty word on secular college campuses. Socialist and Marxist professors are indoctrinating students to teach that capitalism is about selfishness and greed, about money and power, about helping the rich and hurting the poor. And although there are some instances of that abuse, theoretically, none of that is true. Capitalism is superior to all other economic systems in both an economic sense and in a moral sense. It is morally superior because it is based on voluntary exchanges between all parties. There is no coercion. That's the reason someone else defined capitalism as an economic system where individuals are free, notice, are free to decide what they will produce and who they will serve. Under capitalism, if I want something from you, then I need to do something for you. That means each person gets what he wants out of an exchange. An example of that, suppose we go to Smith's and purchase 2 pounds of hamburger in exchange for $12. Now that is a totally random number because I have no clue how much hamburger costs. I don't purchase hamburger, I only eat hamburger. So we go to Smith's and we purchase that hamburger because through that purchase, we valued that hamburger meat more than our $12. We got what we wanted, so that's a win for us. Smith's valued our $12 more than their hamburger meat, so Smith's got what it wanted, so that's a win for them. That's capitalism. That means capitalism is a positive sum game. I know almost nothing about poker. I do believe it is a card game, but I know almost nothing. I've had to do some investigation. I have learned that there are some variations in poker games, and there can be, in some cases, multiple winners. But I also understand in some high-stake competitive poker games, those games are a zero-sum game, meaning that just one person wins the pot and the other people at the table lose. Capitalism is not a zero-sum game. Capitalism is a positive-sum game because all involved parties win. Capitalism only works with limited government. A limited government that has just a few specifically mentioned powers, primarily those listed in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. Understand, capitalism, as we just said, is not a perfect economical system. Unregulated capitalism is problematic. Apart from some regulation, notice some regulation, capitalism permits monopolies to be created, and that's injurious to us all. Apart from some regulation, capitalism permits corporations to emit harmful pollution in the name of profit. So some limited government regulation is necessary to prevent abuse. And then most of us have heard the term crony capitalism. Notice the definition on the note sheet. Crony capitalism is a term describing an economy in which success in business is contingent on close relationships between business and government politicians and bureaucrats. As we just said, capitalism is the free exchange of goods and services in between independent agents. An example of capitalism is, suppose we want to purchase an outdoor grill to barbecue on this summer. Lowe's is selling the one we want for $300. To be exact, $299.99. Then we learn that Home Depot has a sale, and that same exact grill is on sale for $250 or $249.99. Because we are smart shoppers, we choose the grill at Home Depot so we can save $50 on our purchase. That business transaction creates the most value for both parties, us and Home Depot. That's basic capitalism. Now, crony capitalism is different. Here's an example of crony capitalism. Suppose the government, for some strange reason, wants to purchase that same grill we wanted. So the purchase of that grill is assigned to the House of Representatives Committee for Outdoor Grill Acquisition. Now, we purchased that grill from Home Depot because of the cheaper price. The House Committee, though, purchased that grill from Lowe's at the more expensive price. That seems nonsensical. Why would the government purchase the same grill at the higher price? Because the people from Lowe's had lobbied that House Committee to purchase that product from them. Because Lowe's corporate headquarters was located in that committee chairman's district. Because Lowe's made more political contributions to the chairman's re-election campaign. Because Lowe's promises a lobbying job to a retiring committee member. That's crony capitalism. And it happens throughout the government, from defense spending, farm subsidies, clean air programs, infrastructure spending, affordable housing, food stamps, Medicare, health care reform, tax policies, and on and on. And I might add, both political parties have been guilty of crony capitalism. Capitalism is moral because it is predicated on a voluntary exchange between independent parties who agree to the deal because it creates value for both people. Crony capitalism is immoral because one of the parties is the government that has been bought off. Crony capitalism is unfair because the government is spending the public's money but not for the public's interest. That ultimately benefits a politician's relatives he has hired in his office, or his friends, or his political supporters, or himself. The U.S. Constitution grants the government the power to provide for the general welfare of its people. Crony capitalism doesn't do that. And besides, crony capitalism is extremely wasteful because under crony capitalism, government isn't committed to purchasing the best goods and services possible at the cheapest prices. The government under crony capitalism often pays the most exorbitant prices for its acquisitions in order to appease certain politicians. And I'm going to address the objections to capitalism next time. In 1905, a German socialist economist and politician named Max Weber authored a book called The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. It wasn't translated into English until 1930. It was considered a founding text in economical sociology and general sociological studies. In that book, Weber argues that capitalism in Northern Europe evolved after the Protestant Reformation. Now, there might be some here that aren't familiar with that term, Protestant Reformation. The Reformation was a movement in Europe that started inside the Catholic Church. Certain priests and theologians and professors started protesting some of the Catholicism's more unbiblical practices in an attempt to reform the church and return the church to its original biblical roots. That attempt at reformation wasn't successful, and those protesters, or Protestants, Protestant from protester, were excommunicated from the church or burned at the stake as heretics. And those evicted protesters started different groups that evolved into denominations. As an example, that's how Lutheranism started. This fall, on October 31st, to be precise, we celebrate exactly 5 centuries since the Reformation. In a formal sense, the Reformation period started on October 31st, that night, 1517. An influential Catholic priest named Martin Luther had created a document called his 95 Theses, or his 95 complaints against the Catholic Church. And on that Halloween night, he nailed that document to the church door at Wittenberg, Germany. I preached a 5-part series on the Reformation in the fall of 2015, and if you haven't heard that series, I strongly suggest you do. All of our sermons and sermon notes are found on our website, www.smchurch.net. It's all there. I might add, Tom is now starting to put messages onto podcasts so people can actually listen to them on their phones. One form of Protestants were theological Calvinists. Calvinism was named after the famous Protestant reformer John Calvin. Calvinism is a soteriological system. Now, soteriological means the doctrine of salvation, all things pertaining to salvation. Calvinism was a soteriological system that stressed God has elected or selected or chosen a specific number of people to salvation. The opposite soteriological position is Arminianism, named after another Protestant reformer, Jacobus Arminius. Arminianism also teaches that God has selected or elected or chosen some to salvation. So both Calvinism and Arminianism teach that God has elected people to salvation. But the difference between them and the continuing disagreement between them is in how that election happens. Since I'm neither a Calvinist nor an Arminian, I'm going to offend proponents on both sides of that argument and contend that we cannot know how that election happens until heaven. Someone said to me, did we choose God or did God choose us? I said, yes. That's how it happened. There is a sense both statements are true. God chooses us for salvation, and then God enables us to choose Him. But exactly how that happens, contrary to all my Calvinist friends who think they know, I don't believe we do. And when we all get to heaven, they'll understand that. All right, now, at that point in time, because congregational theological teaching was more limited and inadequate than now, most people that subscribed to Calvinism were terrified that they might not be one of the elect. So to reassure themselves that they had been elected to salvation, medieval Calvinists wanted to see some evidence of that salvation in themselves. And in principle, that is a good thing. 2 Corinthians 13 verse 5 tells us to question ourselves. We are to evaluate ourselves, to interrogate ourselves, ask those hard questions to see if we are, in fact, part of the Christian faith. Each of us should ask and then answer the question, if we were in court at trial for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict us? And if there isn't, then our spiritual status is in serious doubt. Something that Protestant reformers considered as evidence of someone's salvation was a strong work ethic. Those medieval Calvinists were entrepreneurial types and built up businesses that generated wealth. But at the same time, those Calvinists were extremely frugal themselves. Calvinists weren't into materialism, as we often are, and weren't big spenders, and that resulted in more discretionary income for them, and that income was reinvested into more business, and in doing that, fueled capitalism. Some historians, such as Weber, argue that the Protestant work ethic was an important contributing factor behind the unscheduled and uncoordinated emergence of modern capitalism. According to some, not all, according to some, though, capitalism's initial impetus came from that theological source. the Protestant work ethic, sometimes called the Puritan work ethic. Puritans were Protestants, and most were Calvinists. That ethic was a concept in theology, sociology, economics, and history that emphasized hard work, discipline, and frugality as a subscription to the values of Protestant Christianity and Calvinism in particular. Now, there was a difference between the Protestant work ethic at that time and how Catholicism perceived work. Example, it was common in more Protestant cultures for someone to eat a sizable breakfast in the morning to sustain them and then forego lunch, or just dabble at some lunch as they worked. Then and even now, Catholic cultures practice siesta at lunchtime. Siestas are afternoon naps. Some countries, such as Spain, have been experimenting with banning siestas in order to transition to a more Protestant work ethic, and in doing that, hoping to reduce their financial debt through more hardworking and efficient employees. In Italy, more and more shops and businesses are remaining open during siesta times. The Protestant work ethic just meant that work was something Protestants stressed and emphasized as spiritual evidence of someone's salvation. So according to some historians, there was a definite connection between capitalism and the Protestant work ethic. Notice the principle. Capitalism is the economic system that best facilitates the Protestant work ethic. Not socialism, not communism. It is capitalism that best facilitates the Protestant work ethic. Then notice the definition for the Protestant work ethic. The Protestant work ethic teaches that honest, hard work for fair compensation glorifies God, assures His blessings, and enables us to bless others. Now, we're going to repeat that definition again and again and again, and we're going to be breaking that definition apart into smaller pieces and then putting them all together again. First, honest, hard work. Our work is to be honest. Proverbs 13, verse 11. Wealth gained by dishonesty will be diminished. Proverbs 16:11. Honest weights and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are His works. In ancient Middle Eastern markets, merchants had a scale and a bag of weights to be used on that scale. Those weights were supposed to be standard weights, but there was no means of checking to see if the merchant hadn't altered his weights, so he could on purpose mismeasure the item the customer was purchasing. That meant the customer had to trust that the merchant was honest. Otherwise, a customer could think he was purchasing a pound of flour, but if the merchant was dishonest and had altered the weights on his scales, he might only be purchasing 14 ounces of flour and not a pound. This proverb, Proverbs 16:11, teaches that the honest businessman understands that his scales and weights are God's. And so he wouldn't dare misuse God's scales to cheat someone. So he's someone that can be trusted. And trust is huge. In 1832, long before he became president, Mr. Lincoln purchased a village store in New Salem, Illinois. One evening, he weighed out on his scales a package of tea and sold it to a female customer. The next morning, he discovered he had made a mistake the night before and had actually shorted her on the amount of tea he sold her. Once he realized his mistake, he then proceeded to weigh out the additional tea that he owed. He then closed the store. He then walked a long distance to her house, and he gave her the additional tea. She had no idea that she had been shortened. No idea. But he knew, and he couldn't continue to do business as usual until he rectified that unintended wrong. But that's one reason he's still called Honest Abe. I will bring my car to a mechanic I trust even if he costs 50% more than most other shops, because integrity matters to me and integrity matters to God. Honest, hard work. Hard work, or hard at work, means someone that is earnest about laboring and exerts serious effort into doing and completing tasks. Bob Black considers himself an anarchist, and in 1985 he authored an essay called The Abolition of Work. In that document, he argued for the abolition of the production and consumption of commodities. This paper argued that, quote, no one should ever work, because work, as Black defines it, is the source of most miseries on earth. He denounced work for its compulsion and for its forms such as subordination to a boss and a job that turns something that has potential enjoyment into a meaningless chore. Black actually said work-related deaths are homicides. Mr. Black is a graphic example of the problem with common sense. Common sense is just not all that common. The man has lost his mind. He's nuts. Society couldn't exist apart from work, and sensible people understand that. God himself is committed to the work ethic. Read the creation account from Genesis 1, where God created all that there is in 6 literal 24-hour days. And after that, notice Genesis 2 and verse 2. And on the 7th day, God ended his work, which he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work, which he had done. The fact God conceptually created work itself legitimizes the work ethic with intrinsic value. God also created man in his own image. In Latin, man was made imago Dei, in the image of God. And that divine image in man means as God was a worker, so man was also created to become a worker. It's interesting to see our oldest grandson, Caleb. He just turned 12. It's interesting to see him in the garage working with his dad on a car. His dad is a journeyman electrician, but he's gifted at mechanicking, and so he has Caleb out there. And our son just sent us a video clip where Caleb was removing a flywheel, which is unusual for 12. When he was just 5 or so, I remember asking him, Caleb, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, that's an unfair question to a 5-year-old. I mean, I'm not sure what I'm going to be when I grow up. Although some people said I'm never going to grow up. He said, I want to be a worker man. That's what God wants from all of us, to be a worker man and a worker woman. David Ben-Gurion helped found the modern state of Israel. And he made these comments about work. And I might add, modern Israelis are extremely hard workers. Notice, we do not consider manual work as a curse or a bitter necessity, not even a means of earning a living. We consider it work to be a high human function. It is a basis of human life. It is the most dignified thing in the life of a human being, and men ought to be proud of it. Paraphrased as, there is moral goodness in work. I contend most parents, now there are exceptions in this room, most parents, though, aren't teaching their children a strong work ethic. And that's evidenced in the laziness of millennials. The term millennial generation, or Generation Y, represents a demographic grouping that is difficult to define because there was so much disagreement about the ages of those in that group. The earliest proposed beginning millennial birth date is 1976, and the latest proposed millennial birth date is 2004. But most researchers believe the window is smaller than that. Most social scientists estimate the millennials are just 20-ish and 30-ish somethings. And there are some 76 million millennials in the U.S. This is a general statement because there are definite exceptions. Even in this congregation, there are exceptions to this statement. But as a whole, millennials struggle in this department. Some millennials think that manual labor is the president of Mexico. 40% of millennials earn less than $10,000 a year and still live at home. Now, we don't shop at Nordstrom's for obvious reasons, but Nordstrom's has just come out with a unique pair of jeans. I call them millennial jeans. This is how those jeans are advertised. Quote, heavily distressed. That's me, I'm heavily distressed. Heavily distressed, medium blue denim jeans in a comfortable, straight leg fit, embody rugged Americana workwear. Workwear that's seen some hard working action with a crackled, caked on muddy coating that shows you're not afraid to get down and dirty. Those jeans actually have a mud-looking substance baked into them. That's incredible. Basically, these are millennial jeans because these jeans are made to give the impression that the person that wears them works hard and has a dirty job. But he doesn't. It's a facade. It's an illusion. And these fake jeans cost $425 per pair. As P.T. Barnum said, there's a sucker born every minute. And the saddest part is there are people out there stupid enough to purchase them. Work is honorable. And Scripture encourages hard work. Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10. Whatever your hand finds to do, sweeping the floor, doing dishes, painting a house, putting together a spreadsheet, repairing brakes on a car, making deliveries, creating a computer program, whatever your hand finds to do, notice, do it with your might. Colossians 3 verse 23. And again, whatever you do, do it. How? Heartily. Heartily means put all our heart and soul into it. Do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men. That means if I were a fly, I'd make sure I landed on each picnic table in the park. If I were a dog, I'd be sure to bite each mailman that came down our street. And if I were a skunk, I determined to be the biggest stinker in town. Because we are to do what we do with all that we have. It doesn't matter what we might do. Assembly line worker, secretary, gas meter man, school teacher, carpenter, machinist, janitor, mechanic, truck driver, computer programmer, homemaker, maid, receptionist, dental assistant, doctor, welder, accountant, warehouse clerk, busboy, babysitter, engineer, bank teller, salesman, grocery store checker, plumber, electrician, store manager, beautician, construction worker, garbage collector, landscaper, policeman, street sweeper, Avon lady, firefighter, flight attendant, and on and on. It doesn't matter. God doesn't expect from us a 90% effort. God doesn't expect a 95% effort or even a 99% effort. We are expected to give our job an all-out 100% effort, and anything less than that is unacceptable to God. I don't have time to document this biblically, but I believe, and there's a consensus out there that agrees, there is work for us to do after this present life. I believe work exists throughout the Messianic millennial on earth and throughout the eternal age in heaven. Although the curse on work that resulted from original sin won't exist in heaven. So work there will be total enjoyment and literally no sweat. Honest, hard work for fair compensation. I believe honest, hard work deserves fair compensation. Notice James 5, verse 4. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you, landowners, kept back by fraud. Fraud is deliberate deception to secure unfair or illegal gain. That's fraud. And this landlord had hired these laborers to work in his fields. He had promised them a set wage. Those men did as he had assigned them to do, and then this landowner stiffed them and didn't pay them. Fraud. The wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of reapers reached the ears of the Lord of the Sabbath. God is Lord of the Sabbath. God hears about unjust labor practices, and He's not happy. Employers should determine what compensation is just and fair. The common secular business practice is to remunerate employees at the lowest possible wage and still retain them as employees, and in doing that increase the business profit margin. That's taking advantage of employees, and that's wrong. I believe business owners and employers should have a higher standard than that, especially those that are Christians. Remember the golden rule? And the golden rule is not he who has the gold rules. That's not the golden rule. Matthew 7, verse 12. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Most people have a difficult time putting themselves in someone else's shoes. But we need to do that more. And if we did, I believe we would be more fair than we are. Acts 24, verse 16. I myself always strive to have a conscience without offense. Conscience without offense means a clear conscience. A clear conscience before God and men. These businessmen that cheat, and it happens often, hire contractors and then come up with some fabricated excuse and reason and refuse to pay them. How does someone that do that sleep at night? We should conduct business so that we have a clear conscience at all times. This verse is unusual because it contains both a quotation from the Old Testament and from the New Testament. 1 Timothy 5:18, for the Scripture says, this quotation is from Deuteronomy 25:4, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. And this is quoting from Jesus in Luke 10, verse 7, and the basis for those instructions he just gave about an ox, the laborer is worthy of his wages. In ancient times, oxen were used to turn a grinding wheel, a large grinding wheel, on the threshing floor to separate the wheat from the staff and the chaff. At first, oxen were permitted to eat some of the grain as they walked around and around and worked. That kept them fed and kept them motivated. But soon farmers decided to put a muzzle on the oxen to prevent them from eating the grain. But in the Mosaic Law, God specifically said not to muzzle the oxen. God commanded the Israelites to permit the animal that did the actual work to share in some of the benefit from that work. Translated into modern society, it means that those that work hard ought to share in the benefits that their work produced. That's the reason 2 Timothy 2, verse 6 reads, the hard-working farmer must be first to partake of the crops. Now, fair compensation has varied applications. We are compensated ourselves through earning an income, and we compensate others through making purchases. As an example, it might not be considered illegal or even unethical, but some people see excessive bargaining as a smart business practice. Excessive bargaining, not bargaining per se, excessive unreasonable bargaining. Some people perceive that to be a smart business practice. The temptation on purchasing something that is negotiable, such as a used car or a couch at a garage sale, the temptation is just to negotiate, and haggle about the price until the seller is just frustrated and worn down and gives in. And then because we got what we wanted at the price we wanted, we boast about our negotiating abilities. But sometimes, people, that's crossing the line from a deal to a steal. Proverbs 20, verse 14 comments on that concept. It is good for nothing, cries the buyer. Meaning the buyer stands there over the product and goes, no, it's not worth that. Can't be worth that. But when he has gone his way, then he boasts. The buyer stands there and devaluates the item he is negotiating to purchase so he can bring down the asking price and get it for what he wanted. Then after he gets what he wants, he boasts and brags about how incredible a negotiator he is. I don't believe it is biblical or appropriate to take advantage of someone. We should want a win-win. A transaction should be of value to both sides. The buyer should win and the seller should win. That's the reason usury is unacceptable. According to modern usage, usury is defined as the illegal practice of loaning money at an unreasonable high rate of interest. The modern slang word for someone doing that is a loan shark. The intention of the lender or usurer is to gain an unfair profit from the loan. Now, in biblical times, the word usury was different in some sense. The word usury then meant charging interest on a loan, period. Usury was just any interest, not just unreasonable interest or high interest, not any interest. That meaning, though, is now obsolete. But usury mentioned throughout the Old Testament just meant interest. In the Old Testament, the Jewish people were not to charge usury or interest on loans made to another Jewish person. Deuteronomy 23:19. You shall not charge interest, some translations read usury, to your brother, meaning a Jewish brother or sister. Interest on money or food or anything that is lent out at an interest. If another Christian comes to me and wants a loan, not sure why, I don't think I look like a banker, but whatever. That's happened numerous times. Most often, if I feel that it's a legitimate need, I just give them money. I don't loan money often at all. If, though, I do loan someone money, I only loan them what I am prepared to lose if that person doesn't repay that loan. And if that person I loan money to is delinquent on that payment, I don't say anything to them, and I just accept it as a loss. I remember some time ago, a friend came to me, and he was in need. And he said, can I borrow $200? And I thought about it, and I said, okay. I was prepared to lose that. I said, okay, so I loaned him $200. I never heard back. He never mentioned the payment. He never mentioned the loan. A decade after that, one afternoon I get a card in the mail from him and a check for $200. He said, I'm so sorry, I forgot. I didn't mean to take advantage of you. Here's what I owe you. Now that's delayed integrity, but that's better than nothing. But most often that doesn't happen. Ancient Jewish people weren't permitted to charge interest on a loan to one another. But they were permitted to charge interest on a loan to a non-Jewish foreigner. Deuteronomy 23:20. To a foreigner you may charge interest, but to your brother, Jewish brother, you shall not charge interest. Why? That the Lord your God may bless you in all to which you set your hand in the land which you are entering to possess. Loaning and charging interest to someone foreign to them was considered a legitimate business transaction and was seen as international commerce, so that was permitted. But even then, the interest rate had to be reasonable. Some time ago, not long after moving here, Hopi and I were helping someone that was recovering from a heroin addiction. She actually stayed in her home for 6 months, free room and board. We got her a car. She found a stable job. She was attending a 12-step program and doing good. She was clean. And then she moved out. We felt she probably moved out prematurely. Something happened. She lost that job. And unbeknown to us, she needed some cash. So she went to this car title cash business across from the pepper mill in Reno. That's a sleazy place. She gave this business the title to her car. They gave her the cash she needed, but after 3 months, she still hadn't found a job, so she wasn't able to meet her obligation to this lender. And so the lender had called, threatening to repossess the car. We didn't want to see that happen, so hope went down, and she paid off the loan and got the title back. And I didn't instruct her to do this, but I would have if I had thought of it. She was curious. She asked the person at the counter, what was the exact interest rate on that loan? Because in our minds, it seemed excessive. What was the rate? Get this, 213%. And I understand from research, some of those loans go as high as 360%. People, that's modern day usury. That's highway robbery. That's stealing from someone. That's unacceptable. And that doesn't represent fair compensation. Honest, hard work for fair compensation glorifies God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. Therefore, whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, there is that whatever you do again. Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Someone suggested that glorifying something or someone means to give an accurate representation of that something or someone. Again, to glorify something or someone means to give an accurate representation of that something or someone. We are God's representatives on earth, and we should be careful to give the people around us an accurate representation of who God is. And in doing that, we are glorifying Him. Do we present an accurate representation of God through excessive absenteeism on the job? Through constant tardiness? Through minimal effort on what we are assigned to do? Are we presenting an accurate representation of God through 2-hour lunches and abused expense accounts? Do people that know we are professing Christians see our job performance and think more or less about God? The famous Protestant reformer Martin Luther said, "Your work is a very sacred matter. God delights in it, and through it He wants to bestow His blessings on you. This praise of work should be inscribed on all tools and on the forehead and the faces that sweat from toiling." That's the reason our work should be worship. All that we do should be glorifying God, and that includes our job, because we are to do what we do on the job as unto the Lord, not just as to men. Our job, no matter how humble and menial simple, is still a divine calling. Our work is to be worship. Honest, hard work for fair compensation glorifies God, assures His blessings. Deuteronomy 2 verse 7. For the Lord your God has blessed you. Where? In all the work of your hand. Psalm 128:2. When you eat the labor of your hands, you shall be happy, and it shall be well with you, meaning someone's basic needs are being met. Proverbs 14:23. In all labor there is profit. God blesses the Protestant work ethic. People that practice this ethic might sometimes struggle, as God does permit us to struggle, but none of them starve, because God has promised to bless that effort. God hasn't promised to meet our greeds, but He has promised to meet our needs if we would practice honest, hard work. Socialist Bernie Sanders constantly criticizes the 1%. And the 1% he literally hates varies from state to state. In Nevada, the top 1% earns as an annual income $312,000. The bottom 99% as an annual income earn $36,000. So the top 1%ers earn 38 times the bottom 99%ers. And that income gap drives socialists nuts. And I'm going to address that next time. Understand something. Riches themselves don't define someone as an economic predator. Riches themselves don't define someone as a person greed-driven to take unfair advantage of people. There are some rich that do that, and that's wrong. But if someone has practiced honest hard work and God has blessed him with riches, we shouldn't be envious of him. We shouldn't be envious. There should be no class envy. We should rejoice for him because God has just been consistent to do for him what he promised he would do. God blesses honest, hard work. And then the final thing, honest, hard work for fair compensation glorifies God, assures his blessings, and enables us to bless others. Galatians 6 and verse 10, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good, especially to those who are of the household of faith. Christians are considered members of the household of faith, and they should be a priority to us in our giving. Notice we are to do good deeds to everyone as we have opportunities, and capitalism gives us more opportunities to do that than any other economic system. Capitalism is the reason, people, the United States has been the most prosperous nation in human history, and the United States has been the most benevolent nation in human history. Question, how benevolent are socialists? How philanthropic are communists? Not so much. Socialists and communists essentially steal from the rich and then give to the poor. From 2013 through 2016, Forbes has ranked Vladimir Putin, Russian President Putin, as the most powerful man on earth. And that was during Obama's administration. Forbes said Putin is the most powerful man on earth. Russian journalists believe Putin is a secret multi-billionaire. So how benevolent would Mr. Putin be? I'm sure every pore in his body just oozes with the milk of human kindness, as do all former KGB agents, except not. This is what most people do after receiving blessings from God. Receive from God, receive from God, receive from God, receive from God. People primarily consume God's blessings on themselves. This is what we should do after receiving from God. Receive from God, receive from God, receive from God, and share with someone in need. Receive from God and give to a deserving cause. On October 25th, 1859, the steam clipper Royal Charter rounded an island off the coast of Wales on what was scheduled to be the celebratory last evening of its 2-month journey from Melbourne, Australia to Liverpool, England. Some 500 men, women, and children were aboard that ship. Most were returning home with small fortunes after working in Australia's goldfields. Those fortunate passengers had gold crammed into their pockets, hidden in money belts, stuffed into luggage boxes, and stored it up in the strong room. This was a ship of unusual riches. After completing 59 days of that 60-day journey, the passengers were toasting one another at the dining table. But then the weather drastically and suddenly turned. The barometer started falling. As the Royal Charter neared this island's rocky cliffs, a menacing haze overtook the skies in the early evening. No one knows if the ship's experienced captain, Thomas Taylor, paid much attention to those telltale signs, but a raging battle between that ship and storm raged over the next 12 hours. Confronted with a decision, 59 days from Melbourne on a 60-day journey, and after passengers had just toasted him at the dining table, Taylor chose to sail on. That decision is one of the most second-guessed decisions in the history of meteorology. It is also one of the most fateful. The Royal Charter bashed onto the rocks, and all but 41 of its 500 passengers were crushed or drowned. And get this, most of the victims were weighted down by the gold in their pockets and money belts. People, God doesn't bless us with material wealth so we can just stuff it and hoard it and spend it on ourselves. We have been blessed to be a blessing. Honest, hard work for fair compensation glorifies God, assures His blessings, and enables us to bless others. Would you bow with me for prayer? Father, I thank you for your word and what it has for us to learn. We are blessed to be a part of this nation. We experience amazing freedom. We are also the beneficiaries of a capitalistic economic system that allows us to function in freedom and to be what we want to be and do what we want to do and go where we want to go and have what we want to have. And we are so grateful because so many on this earth do not have that opportunity. Thank you for this nation and what it means to each one of us. And I pray, dear God, that we will take these lessons we've learned and we will apply them starting tomorrow morning. For those of us who have jobs, help us to approach our jobs with integrity, with sincere and all-out effort, to do our very best, knowing that what we do, we are doing for you and not just for an employer. I pray, dear God, that you will help us to understand that you have blessed us to be a blessing and not to just get all we can all we get, and sit on the lid. But God, help us to understand that we are here not just for ourselves, but for others. So God, take the words of your word and the words of my message and make a difference in each of us, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.